These wide receivers we're going to discuss today are on the cusp of a breakout. And today, Jeff Bell and I, we are going to identify some wide receivers that you should go out and target in your dynasty leagues before they spike in value. Jeff, I guess I have kind of an open-ended question for you. The definition of a breakout here, because we did a little mix of veterans and young players and even a dash of rookies in here. So how is it that you would identify a breakout player?
More valuable at the end of the year than they are at the beginning of the year, I think is really just kind of the simple way to look at it. A player that and ideally rises tiers of value. That's what you're looking for.
And I think that's it, like going up tiers. Like we're not just talking about like, this guy was the RB 60 going into the year and now he's the RB 52. Like we're talking about guys that are really going to skyrocket up the rankings. And what we're going to do is get progressively deeper as the show goes on. So we'll start with our layup here, then we'll throw up some mid-range shots, and then we'll go for the three-pointer. But Jeff, start us off. Who is the guy that you have identified as a potential breakout player for the 2025 season?
Yeah, some of this is moving off of recent news that we have received on Chris Godwin's injury, but Emeka Egbuka is going to be my breakout receiver. And I think that the assumption came in when he gets drafted by Tampa Bay. You're seeing Chris Godwin there. You're seeing Mike Evans there. You see Jackson Smith and Jigba came out of Ohio State, and he didn't do anything his rookie year. And so we think, well, Emeka Egbuka is probably going to be similar to that. Every single bit of news that we have gotten about Emeka Egbuka in camp has basically said from day one, he has looked the part. He has been ready to step right into this offense. Now, Chris Godwin is on the PUP list, and granted, that is a little bit different than the PUP list that you might be thinking of, where it's an automatic 6 games out. Players can be activated off that PUP list at any time right now, but we know Godwin's not ready to practice right now. And I think that we have a pretty good idea that if he's even on the field week 1, he's going to be a far cry from the Chris Godwin that we have come to expect. And so that really opens up Emeka Egbuka the opportunity to claim that slot role and really make it his own. And I think that if he does that immediately and becomes that slot within that offense, one, the value of that position is extremely high. Working in this Baker Mayfield offense, we saw Chris Godwin carry that to being wide receiver 2 overall before his injury. Granted, Liam Cohen is gone now, but that is a very valuable position. The other part of that is
promote Josh Grizzard from within too, so we don't expect like a huge change in the offensive philosophy there.
Right. The other part of that is we've seen Chris Godwin work outside. And so if Emeka Egbuka is very comfortable in that slot, you're not going to pull him out of there and start to move him around. You're going to say, well, Godwin, we're ramping you up. We're going to line you up outside, and we're going to have you in that role. We're going to leave Emeka Egbuka, who's productive in this role. And so that really opens up the potential for Egbuka to deliver immediately on value and be one of these rookie breakouts, similar a Ladd McConkey type rookie breakout. And so that's where I think right now, sitting at wide receiver 21, there's just a lot of upside that he's able to realize. And if he breaks out of that consensus thought that he's going to have a little bit of a red shirt rookie year, I mean, that wide receiver 21 value is going to be a top 10 wide receiver value after this year.
Yeah, and we talked about this when we did our divisional preview episode, audio only. If you haven't checked that out, you can find that on Apple Podcasts. But we talked about this when we talked about the NFC South, and we talked about the Tampa Bay Bucks. And we said Emeka Egbuka is a guy who can carve out an immediate role. And if he does get that slot role, it's going to be so valuable. Also with Chris Godwin, it just recently came out. We got this news on Tuesday afternoon that he had to have a secondary surgery on that ankle this spring. So we saw the picture going around from early June where his ankle was still swollen. Our Adam Hutchison talked about how his calf had shrunk a little bit and shown some atrophy in that leg as well. We're getting not the warm and fuzzies out of camp that we want to hear about a player coming off of a season-ending injury. So I'm completely with you. This isn't a wait for Chris Godwin to retire and then Emeka Egbuka break out, or wait for Mike Evans to fall off the age cliff or anything like that. The opportunity could be his for the taking week 1. And then let's just say Chris Godwin is ready week 1 and is the player he used to be. Last year, Tampa Bay ran 3 wide receiver sets at one of the highest rates in the NFL. So even if both of these guys, Mike Evans returns to form and Chris Godwin returns to form, Emeka Egbuka is still going to be on the field for 60 to 70% of the snaps out there. And we know that he's a good player who can draw targets. So I like that call out quite a bit. Jeff, before we go into the next player, I do want to mention the Football Guys magazine that is still at the presses, going to be getting delivered within the next week or so here, but it's not too late for you to order your copy. Pre-sale orders are done, but you can still order yours. Just $25. We'll have a link in the description here on this YouTube video. Jeff, you wrote articles that are in there. I wrote articles that are in there. We've got previews from our rookie guide going deep on this incoming rookie class. Joe Bryant wrote a 25 lessons learned in 25 years, along with a touch up on value-based drafting. This is a lot of information you want for the 2025 season. We have projections, rankings, all that stuff. But there's also a lot of good evergreen content in here. Jeff, I know you've had a chance to look at the digital copy before it went to print, and it's a nice piece of content that we put together there.
Yeah, absolutely grab this. I think that people are really going to be surprised by just the quality of the document, just being able to sit down and read through it. And this isn't going to be, sometimes you might see a magazine at the newsstand and it feels like the first time you read it, the pages are falling out at that point. Now this is going to be a lot more than that.
Yeah, very much so like a commemorative piece. If you enjoy Football Guys, if you like this show, if you like any of the staffers here at Football Guys, this is just a really good way to kind of show your support and get a cool commemorative piece of history celebrating 25 years of Football Guys. Jeff, we haven't been here for the whole 25 years, but we have definitely enjoyed our time here and would love to be here for another 25 years. Now, let's go on and keep talking about some breakout players. And this is a guy I've talked about quite a bit on this show already, but Jameson Williams right now is getting drafted as the wide receiver 22 in Dynasty. And we are still looking at a very young player who was drafted early in the NFL draft. And we know the story about the start of his career. Coming off the ACL tear, he was basically a zero his rookie season. And then he had the gambling suspension going into year two. He's had these minor injuries that have kind of piled up. But over the second half of last season, we saw the breakout and we saw what Jameson Williams can be, which is a wide receiver one in fantasy. If you look from week 10 onward last year, his pace, 119 targets, 81 receptions, 1,309 yards, and over 10 touchdowns. If you look at the fantasy production that came out of that week, and we're not looking at a super small sample here, we're looking at an 8-week sample size, he would have been the wide receiver 5 over the course of an entire season. And of course, they were playing some tough matchups during that stretch where they were forced to throw the ball a lot. I can't just sit here and say that Jameson Williams is assuredly going to be a 1,300-yard receiver, but he does have that upside. We've talked about it a little bit, and I don't want to talk about it too much because it always upsets the YouTube audience here, but Amon-Ra St. Brown last year did see a dip in his target share, and that is directly correlated to what we see with this Jameson Williams breakout. So the offense could change up a little bit with Ben Johnson out of the picture now, but we do have faith in this Lions offense. Top to bottom, they're just one of the best rosters in the NFL, and Jameson Williams now going into year 4, it seems like he is finally starting to put the pieces together and has such a sky-high ceiling. We're looking at him right now as the wide receiver 22, but he is still so young and so talented that he could slip into the top 12 or maybe even the top 10 after this season.
Yeah, I implore you that if you have any doubts about Jameson Williams' ability or upside, go back and watch his season with Alabama, because that year Bryce Young won the Heisman Trophy. I still contend Jameson Williams should have won that Heisman Trophy because he was that good. He was that big of a difference maker. And his injury during the national championship really swung that game towards Georgia's favor. And so I think that when you stack it up, when you look at it and swayed a little bit, because I just saw a clip from training camp just before I got on this where Brian Branch and Jameson Williams going head to head, and Jameson Williams burns him relatively easily, and you see him stretch out for the ball and not break stride. We know the elite speed that Jameson Williams possesses, but when you look at it, we know that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a very, very good football player. He's been very, very productive. But when you're talking about like a Jamar Chase type of a receiver or a Justin Jefferson type of a receiver, or like these types of elite high-end receivers, don't take this the wrong way, because we know the numbers have gotten there for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But right. Jameson Williams is that type of receiver, and Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't really that type of receiver. He's very, very productive, very, very good football player. Don't get the Amon-Ra St. Brown. Do not add me to your diss track list. I don't need to be on there. You don't need to change your jersey number because of what Jeff was saying on this program. But that being said, the overall upside for Jameson Williams is in a different tier than it is for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we did see hints of that last year in the Detroit offense, of them making sure that Jameson Williams was a little bit more involved. And we've said it before that it does not take much off that target share peeling off from Amon-Ra St. Brown's direction towards Jameson Williams' direction. And all of a sudden that Jameson Williams is outscoring Amon-Ra St. Brown. And to be completely honest, in my projections and in my current rankings for this coming season, I have Jameson Williams above Amon-Ra St. Brown because of that.
And I've got them really close. I've got Amon-Ra as my wide receiver 12. I've got Jameson Williams as my wide receiver 18. We've seen Amon-Ra do it. We haven't seen it from Jameson Williams yet, but I think you're trying to capture the range of outcomes with these players. And the range of outcomes with Jameson Williams is so high that's why I'm willing to put him well ahead of where the consensus is drafting him. And I remember even, coming into his rookie season, you and I talking about Jameson Williams a lot and saying that he's just a very miscast player. I think a lot of people see that he has a slender frame and that he is a very fast receiver. And they just think that he's nothing but a field stretcher, but he is just so silky as a route runner, the way he can get in and out of his breaks. He can make plays after the catch. He can jump out of a stadium to come down with these balls that go up over his head. I mean, there really isn't a flaw in his game. And you see it time and time again that when he gets the opportunity, he looks like he is shot out of a cannon, whether it be on a jet sweep or on these little gimmicky plays. And if they start drawing up even more of those plays while also utilizing him as the wide receiver 1 here, the ceiling is just so high. So we've talked about Jameson Williams a lot this offseason, but I don't think the market has gotten to where they should be yet.
And one of the things that if you watch a lot of football, you can kind of intuitively know the angles of a defensive player and kind of have a pretty good idea about where a player is going to be tackled. There are players that are very rare that the angles end up wrong. And it takes like high level speed for that to happen. I vividly remember Ted Ginn, the first time he touched the ball for Ohio State on a punt return. The Michigan State coverage team, they just weren't where they're used to running to where they're supposed to be. And Ted Ginn was 10 yards down the field when they got to where they were supposed to be. And Jameson Williams is that type of player that his very first touchdown against Minnesota is evidence of that, where it's just these things don't happen on an NFL field very often.
Exactly. So big fan of Jameson Williams, expecting the breakout here in 2025, or I guess that might kind of be cheating because we kind of saw the breakout over the second half of 2024, but I still don't think that we've scratched the surface of what his ceiling could be in this offense and just as an overall NFL player. So Jeff, continuing to work down the list, who is another player that you think could break out in 2025?
Khalil Shakir is a player that I think that can break out, and you might say that he already broke out last year. I think that, when it really came down to it, he broke out and he was surprising and he was very productive relative to the value where you got him. But he has 76 receptions, 821 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like that overall production's a bit muted. And, I've seen talk. I feel like I'm probably done talk about Joe Brady's offense and the way that it spreads the ball out. But DJ Moore had a season with Joe Brady where he had 163 targets. And I'm not saying that Khalil Shakir is DJ Moore, but I am saying that if you were to look back at last year, I think that there was a lot that was potentially left on the field just because of the way some of the games went for the Bills. And I'm vividly thinking about the Monday night game in week 3 against Jacksonville. Khalil Shakir had 6 receptions, 72 yards and a touchdown. That was in the first half, basically, because the Bills just blew the Jaguars out. He didn't have to play the second half. And so I think that there are some instances like that where there is a lot left on the field. And when you look back at the Bills' final play of the season, the ball that Dalton Kincaid did not catch, if you actually look at what was supposed to happen on that play, that was schemed up from the start to go to Khalil Shakir. The Chiefs read it dead, and that play was done. But that was the season is on the line. We are scheming this up for Khalil Shakir here in this moment. And I think that having a season to reflect, an off season to reflect coming into this year, I think that there is a lot of potential for Shakir to emerge as this number 1 wide receiver that everybody has been saying that Josh Allen needs with us in this offense. Short of Keon Coleman just surprising it and putting everything together, I think Shakir is just about the only candidate for that in this offense right now. And so I think that being able to grab him at this value and still having the opportunity that he does become Josh Allen's clear number 1 wide receiver, and that there is just a little bit more target share that flows his direction, and maybe some little bit more of those spike games, because that's really the biggest thing that was lacking off him last year, not having some of these just huge breakout performances. And a lot of that's because the Bills didn't need him to. Some of that is because they spread targets around. But I think that when they look at what they've got and trying to get Amari Cooper last year to try to replace something, I think that Shakir is the player in this offense that could see a lot more volume. And we know that being attached to Josh Allen, we saw what that did for Stephon Diggs. And not saying that Khalil Shakir is Stephon Diggs. I'm not saying he's DJ Moore, but I am saying right now that he's probably a little bit forgotten about.
He also got banged up quite a few times last year, missed a handful of games, and you wonder how much that kind of impacted his play. But I remember last year being very in on Khalil Shakir as a guy that I just could not stop drafting. And my kind of thesis behind it was looking at some of the underlying efficiency metrics for him and just saying, like, this guy is a dog after the catch. Like, if they could just create some easy plays for him, just give him these layups, he's going to be able to make plays after the catch. Last year, on an increased target total, he was third in the league in yards after the reception. So it's something that he does really, really well. Kind of works in the short to intermediate areas, but then every once in a while he can surprise the defense and get behind them. The touchdowns left a little bit to be desired last year. You talked about it as well, that or I mentioned that he was dealing with some injuries, and you kind of talk about this often, Jeff, right? Like where we have these players that we really like, these deep sleepers, and then they break out, and then everyone is just like, well, that was boring, let's not draft him anymore. Well, we kind of saw the breakout last year, but still left some meat on the bone where there's a lot more. But now I don't know if post-type sleeper is the best word because of where he's getting drafted, but we were all really excited about Khalil Shakir last year. He has a really good season, and now the excitement has kind of worn off when really we should be looking at what he did last year and saying he is developing, he is taking that step forward. But a lot of people see what he did last year and think that that is just his ceiling outcome. When had he played a full 17 games, he would have scratched near 1,000 yards, and I think that that is a huge difference. If you see 1,000 plus yards, you're way in on a player, but because he missed a handful of games and just got over 800 yards, we don't get quite as excited about him.
Well, and I think that we've gotten spoiled from like guys like Jamar Chase, guys like Justin Jefferson, guys like Puka Nacua that immediately they just pop immediately, and like that just stands out. And I think that that's made us forget a little bit on these players that they just get a little bit better every year and a little bit better every year, and along with that becomes more responsibility, more schemed opportunity, and overall more volume. And that's what we're hunting. We're hunting volume in fantasy football. We know the efficiency should be there in this Bills offense with Josh Allen at quarterback. We're just hunting. We just want to give us a little bit more volume, bump that 100 targets up to 130 targets, 140 targets. And all of a sudden you're talking about a player that's having an 1,100 yard season, not a player that's having an 800 yard season. And I think that that is potential for Khalil Shakir.
Would you also say that it makes sense that maybe a guy coming out of the MAC, an undersized day 3 pick, might take a couple extra
Mountain
years
West?
Yes, I'm sorry, Mountain West. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, Mountain West. Yeah, but when you see these guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson that you alluded to, these guys are playing against what's pretty darn close to NFL talent on a week in and week out basis. So for a guy like Khalil Shakir, he's playing a game in the NFL against guys that are bigger and stronger and faster than he has ever seen before. So it might take him a couple of extra years to really hit his ceiling potential. Still just 25 years old. I agree with you, Jeff. I think that the best years are still ahead of Khalil Shakir. All right, next guy I'm going to talk about, and I think this could be a guy who could be an immediate contributor this season, Luther Burden. There was a lot of excitement for him way early in the prospect cycle this year. January, February, everybody loved Luther Burden. And then he didn't go in round 1. He went in round 2. And it seems like people have just lost their excitement a little bit. He's getting drafted right now as the wide receiver 34 in Dynasty. And he is just a good player. I don't want to make the Deebo Samuel comp to every single player who's tenacious after the catch, but that's what Luther Burden does. He had a lot of manufactured touches while he was at Mizzou last year, but consistently making big plays after the catch. And I've kind of heard the argument go both ways, that either he was limited, and that's why they had to manufacture touches for him, or that Brady Cook, his quarterback, was limited and they couldn't get him the ball in ways that they wanted to. Either way, the Bears liked what they saw enough to take an early second-round pick on him. And I know it's a very crowded room right now in this Ben Johnson offense. In addition to DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, they drafted Colson Loveland. Cole Kmet is still there. And now they've got Luther Burden in the mix as well. But we just talked about the Lions offense a little bit. And that slot role is so valuable in Ben Johnson's offense, whether it was Jarvis Landry, Danny Amendola, or Amon-Ra St. Brown playing out of it. All of those guys were focal points of the offense. And we've heard Ben Johnson talk about the possibility of DJ Moore and Rome Odunze playing inside there. but that was pre-draft, and he didn't sound like he was completely sold on the idea of those guys playing that role. For them to go out and get Luther Burden, now we're looking at a guy who is very much so a slot-centric player who can kind of step in as a supercharged Amon St. Brown in this offense. So I know there's concern here. I mean, the downside here is that Luther Burden struggles to climb the depth chart and that he's watching from the outside on 2 wide receiver sets. But the upside is that we get a guy who is immediately the focal point of the offense, a guy who's going to get a lot of touches that are going to be easy and close to the line of scrimmage that allow him to create after the catch and do what he does best. So a volatile player, not an assured breakout by any means, but I think the ceiling is so high for Luther Burden that if he hits, it's not going to be moving up a couple spots in the dynasty rankings. This guy is going to be skyrocketing up the dynasty rankings, and everyone's going to view him the same way they did before the NFL draft. Jeff, any big thoughts on Luther Burden?
I mean, you just talked for a couple minutes there about the upside case of Luther Burden, and to be honest, I feel like you even undersold it a little bit on what is potentially here with Luther Burden, because if somebody has questions about your comment about whether the gadget uses, those types of things, was him or the quarterback, it was neither. It was the offensive coordinator, because if you flip on the 2023 tape, he is everything that you want to see. He's making plays all over the field, and there's kind of been conversation that has come out after the draft where he was not happy with his role in Missouri. And I said it when we were doing the rookie guide and when I was doing my prospect eval on Luther Burden. I said, just look at 2023. Don't even bother with 2024. And I had Missouri fans that coming to me and saying, thank you for saying that, because they were like, this guy is unbelievable. Our offensive coordinator did not use him correctly. And they're just seeing analysis that are calling him a gadget and whatever else. But that being said, I think that marrying him to the slot, I think he can do so much more than being stuck in the slot. And I think that he has the potential to be an outside player in this offense. I think that there's a chance that he works out of the backfield in this offense a little bit and kind of maybe becomes a little bit of that third down back in certain types of situations. And so I think what you're going to end up seeing, the healthy Luther Burden, is this player that gets moved all around the field. And it's almost like Khalil Shakir when he was like first starting to kind of get samples, where it's like they're doing different interesting things with him. I think that Luther Burden can be the sports car version of that. And I think that yes, everything is cooled off about the excitement on him. And a lot of that is because we are just so starved for football. We are starved for football news. We are starved for literally anything. And so because of that, what we do get is going to be blown out to the nth degree. And what did we get about Luther Burden? We got the weird story where he was apparently injured for minicamp and the team didn't realize he was injured. And everybody just took that and sprinted with it and went really, really hard with it. And I think that you could easily file that in. Remember, it was who was playing above who was playing above Justin Jefferson? It was the not Olamide. It was
Obi Topin. No, that's basketball. I know it's on the tip of my tongue. It's right there. Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, it was
Olamide.
It wasn't Zacchaeus. I know where you're going. Yeah, somebody in the YouTube comments let us know. But I know
exactly Johnson, maybe.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. But there was that story that he was playing above Justin Jefferson, or there was the story
Johnson,
that there was the story where Jamar Chase couldn't catch the ball because there wasn't the stripes on the ball. And these littlest pointless things become the biggest things. And certainly Luther Burden is not Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase probably, but like we take these little things and we just run with them and don't take a moment to say, well, there's probably something else going on there. And plus there's a long time before the season even starts. And so I think that this is a good call out here on a player that dropping a wide receiver 34. I mean, yeah, people had him as their wide receiver 1 or 2 in this class. And that was
him or Tedero McMillan. That was like the conversation all the entire season. And then like leading up to it. And then people started just like finding little holes to poke in his profile. And then he fell to day 2 and everybody was just like, beating their chest for saying, I told you he wasn't a first round pick. But yeah, this is a very, very good player. And then you talk about some of the concerns about like what happened in rookie minicamp with the injury. Well, guess what? He's healthy now. and the Bears gave him a fully guaranteed rookie deal. So he's going to be out there. He's going to be playing. And I just want to share this nugget that I came across today. David Gattieri, Guru FF World on Twitter tweeted this out. The only SEC wide receivers to have 1,200 plus receiving yards as a freshman or a sophomore: Jamar Chase, Alshon Jeffrey, Mike Evans, Jerry Jeudy, AJ Brown, and Luther Burden. So a really short list of guys who have come out of the SEC, with that really early breakout that we like to see. There's just so much to get excited about with Luther Burden, especially the potential role as the slot player in Ben Johnson's offense.
Yeah, and the cap ramifications might limit it, but Ben Johnson is an interesting one here because he certainly is putting it out there that it's his way or the highway, and he's trying to, Dan Campbell instilled culture in Detroit. He's trying to instill culture in Chicago. There's been the whispers around DJ Moore. I mean, there's this chance that week 6 he's just angry at DJ Moore, and DJ Moore is suddenly not a Bear, and Luther Burden is like full steam ahead. I mean, that 1% chance that could happen.
There's been a lot of talk from the players in Chicago about how there's a big culture shift, how Ben Johnson really demands excellence and is riding these players pretty hard, and juxtaposed alongside what they had over the last couple of years with Matt Eberflus. Quite a good and hopefully a welcome change from these players. But Jeff,
we see that though sometimes with the new coach, where the new coach will kind of be like, well, I got to do my vets and do that, and then if they start out 2-4, then that new coach will say, I'm done with this plan. We're gonna go with my guys.
Yeah, and it wouldn't shock me if that's they get to that point where it's just like, we spent the 10th overall pick on Colson Loveland, we spent an early second on Luther Burden. Those are the guys that were handpicked by Ben Johnson, and we might see them have a much bigger role than expected. I will also say, I don't want to, correct myself or backtrack too much, but I did talk about some concerns I had about Colson Loveland, coming off the shoulder injury, unable to practice earlier. It does sound like he's going to be a full go within the next few days here at Bears camp. So another player to get excited about in this Bears offense, potentially, if he's able to start practicing early. But Jeff, let's keep working our way down the list. Who is the final wide receiver that you would like to talk about today that could potentially break out in 2025? And looking at this name, you are going deep with this one.
Yeah, I think that one of our failings in fantasy football is when we see a rookie that isn't involved or it isn't productive, we immediately write them off as like they're just horrible. And I think Jacob Cowing for the 49ers there has been a persistent drumbeat in mini camp that he came back as one of the most improved players. And when you're starting to look at this 49ers wide receiver room, we know Brandon Ayuk is very likely to miss a portion of the season to start, whatever portion that ends up being, but we know that he's going to be out. Now we've got Ricky Pearsall is on the pup, and again, the pup is not the pup right now, but it is the pup, and he's got his hamstring that he's working through right now. And so
he'll be back in a few days.
Stack it up.
Just got to put it out there. They said he'll be back in a few days.
Okay.
Brandon Ayuk
will be back in a few days though too, but, But then Javon Jennings has a contract situation too, and so you start to stack it up. And
Deebo Samuel is gone. Yeah,
Deebo Samuel is gone, and Cowing is explosive player, able to create with the ball in his hands, able to win downfield. And some of these smaller players can struggle that first year because there's just a difference in strength, this difference in playing the NFL game. Everything about Cowing has been positive, glowing in camp. And the Athletic had a story that just came out maybe like a week ago or so, where they had the beat writers for all 32 teams kind of say, like, who's your under the radar guy or who you think's going to break out? And, his names like Marvin Mims for the Broncos and some of those names. And Jacob Cowing was the 49ers name that was mentioned. And so this is one of those things where you start to pick up pieces of like, well, this guy over here is saying this about Jacob Cowing's name's being mentioned. It's being put out there. And I think it's way under the radar. And like I do think that this is one of the areas, like Kyron Williams is the most visible recent example of this, of these players that don't do anything their rookie year. And then the coaching staff gives them their homework, what you need to improve on, come back next year. And the coaching staff wants to see, like, did they do that? Did they do the things that we asked them to do? And if they do, that positions themselves to be in a much better spot, and they become these second-year breakouts or these third-year breakouts. And when we're talking about a player that could break out, I mean, Cowing, I think it's there for him. And especially with Ayuk out, we know we know even if Ricky Pearsall is healthy and Juwan Jennings is in camp, there's still an opening for the wide receiver 3
Right.
job for the 49ers. And if anything happens with those two guys, there's a very big opening for the 49ers there. And that's where Cowling, I think, is way off the radar. He's probably available in your deepest leagues even right now. And he's a player that you can stash and wait and see how this turns out during camp.
Yeah, and once you look beyond those top two, Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings, it is Demarcus Robinson, Equinemius St. Brown,
Who got
Jordan Watkins,
DUI.
Russell Gage. What was that?
Demarcus Robinson, I had a little bit of an off the field issue that.
All right, I wasn't aware of that, but yeah, I mean, there's it's thin. It got really, really thin, really, really quickly. So yeah, you talk about it, the opportunity could be there, not even like a late season, like it might be as early as week one, where if Brandon Ayuk, right now not looking too great. Our Adam Hutchinson today, who has had, I gotta, I have shouted him out so much this offseason, but Adam Hutchinson is just having, a handful of great off seasons. He had some good calls last year, and he's on it this year. But he was saying that he expected Brandon Ayuk to miss some time, and showed up in base camp today and said, "Hey, everyone doing projections. I'd recommend putting at least 4 games out for Brandon Ayuk. So don't expect him to be out there early in the season." And that could mean that week one, if they can't rectify things with Juwan Jennings, it could be Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing out there as the number 1 and number 2 receivers to start the season. And thinking about how the 49ers operate, we'll go off on a little tangent here with the Juwan Jennings contract situation. He has wanted a contract extension or a trade. And when I look at it, the 49ers, they seem to prioritize comp picks so much in how they build and structure their team for future picks that why would they go out and trade Juwan Jennings right now for what, a 5th or 6th round pick, when they can just have him play this year out, walk next year in free agency, and get a 3rd or 4th round comp pick? So I don't think that they're going to budge here. In my opinion, the 49ers have the majority of the leverage here. They gave Juwan Jennings a nice contract last year. I don't think they're going to want to re-up that and pay him even more money. This is a team that has found a lot of great wide receivers later on in the draft, and I think they trust their ability to find these late round wide receivers. So Juwan Jennings, I don't know if we're going to see a full season holdout or what the case will be, but I think the 49ers hold the leverage in that situation right now, and that might mean that we do miss a handful of Juwan Jennings games due to this contract dispute.
Yeah, and the other thing too, they added Jordan Watkins in the draft, and like he's the next Ricky, so like he's got to be the next guy. Again, just going back to that point of, I think that if you really want to find value, look for these second-year players that are in potential situations to be very involved and at a deep discount, because they aren't the rookie mystery box that hasn't happened yet. They're the guy that's already proven that he's very horrible at 23 years old.
Well, Jeff, how about a year 3 guy that showed some real signs of life last year? Cedric Tillman is a guy that I didn't think I'd be talking about too much, but we see this. I feel like we've talked about this a lot throughout the offseason, that there's like this really heavy bias on what happens early in the season and what happens late in the season. And Cedric Tillman's breakout came smack dab in the middle of the season when nobody really cared all that much. But when it happened, I mean, people were talking about Cedric Tillman. I remember in weekly rankings, people were putting him inside their top 10, inside their top 12. Everyone was dumping 100% of their fab to get Cedric Tillman. We saw this little stretch of games where over a 4-week sample, he had 40 targets, 24 receptions, 302 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I'm not going to do the, extrapolated over 17 games, but let's just say it would have been really, really good if he could keep that pace up for an entire year. Of course, he got injured, and, he was able to, unable to come back for the rest of the season. But we did see signs of life where Cedric Tillman just kind of came out of nowhere in the middle of the season. And I know there's a lot of concerns right now about the Cleveland Browns and what they look like, but I see Cedric Tillman as a very similar player to Nico Collins, where he is just a big physical receiver. He can make plays after the catch. And we saw last year that when they wanted to make him the offensive focal point, he was up to the task and he fulfilled that role well. So right now, being valued as the wide receiver 64, like I said, I didn't really think that Cedric Tillman was a guy I'd really be in on, but it does seem like we just overlooked this breakout. And it's not like he just stopped playing well or anything happened. He got hurt, and that was the end that we saw of him. And it's just kind of this out of sight, out of mind. We haven't seen anything outside of that 4-week breakout, but Cedric Tillman right now getting valued as wide receiver 64. I will gladly go and see if I can get some Cedric Tillman on my team for what, a 3rd round pick is probably all it's going to take.
Yeah, and he's kind of inked in right now as the number 2 receiver with Jerry Jeudy. there's not really anybody to push him for that. I mean, maybe Deontay Johnson, if he bounces back and gives you Deontay Johnson from a couple of years ago. But I know Kevin Stefanski kind of had a quote where, minicamp's going to be really big for Deontay Johnson, and then Deontay Johnson didn't show up to minicamp. So like that kind of has already happened. Jamari Thrash is a player that's been getting some positive beat out of minicamp, but he's kind of married to the slot. He's a completely different type of player. And so I think that I'm with you on Tillman contingently that Joe Flacco is the quarterback, because Joe Flacco is the quarterback. Then I think
they're
that
throwing
they will be able
times.
Well, they'll throw the ball a lot, but also where they're able to throw the ball, they're able to push it downfield, and that's where Tillman is able to take advantage of it. I worry that if we're seeing a Dylan Gabriel or a Kenny Pickett offense, then to me that seems like Jerry Jeudy's going to get about 128 targets per game, and everybody else is just kind of going to be around and somewhat involved. But I think that in a Joe Flacco offense that is pushing the ball vertically, that is throwing the ball, then I really, really like Cedric Tillman there. It's just,
and I'll also just to go off of that, I think you make a good point with the quarterbacks, and I will agree with you wholeheartedly there, because Joe Flacco is very much so a gunslinger at this point in his career. And Cedric Tillman, what he does well, he isn't the best separator. He does need a quarterback that's going to trust him to come down with those 50-50 balls that he kind of turns into 80-20 balls. And what we've seen from Kenny Pickett is that he is just careful with the ball to a fault. Like, he will never push the ball into a tight window. Shedeur Sanders, very similar what we saw at Colorado. He's going to get the ball to his first read when he's wide open and doesn't really do a whole lot outside of that. Dylan Gabriel might push the ball a little bit further than Pickett or Shedeur Sanders would. But yeah, I mean, this is very much so contingent. Like, if we got word that Joe Flacco was the starter for the entire season, Jerry Jeudy would be inside my top 20 and Cedric Tillman would be inside my top 36. I think the major concerns that we have are the quarterbacks.
Yeah, and that's where, again, it goes back to if it's a Kenny Pickett or a Dylan Gabriel offense, I feel like Cedric Tillman seems like the type of guy that will have an amazing separation score, because he is just running downfield all by himself, because that's just, they're dumping it off to David Njoku and to Jerry Jeudy and the running backs. And so that's where my contingency lies on Cedric Tillman. That being said, I think spike weeks, their potential definitely for spike weeks and big plays to break off a touchdown on any play. But really, when you look at, take a moment and look at, like, I'm thinking about like Darnell Mooney last year. There was, other than some people that I know, there were very few people that were mentioning Darnell Mooney last year. But when you looked at it, it's like, this guy is inked in as the wide receiver 2 for the Falcons. There's literally nobody that is pushing for that job. And what did we get out of Darnell Mooney? Basically would have had 1,000 yards had he stayed healthy right at the very tail end of the season. And so I think that that's where, look for these guys that, as you look at the depth charter, as you look, they're very clearly going to be the wide receiver 2. And yeah, there's concerns about the quarterback, so you're not going to draft him. But at the same time, there's a positive on the quarterback that will make you want to draft him.
That brings us to the next guy we want to talk about, Josh Reynolds. I'm kidding, but probably the wide receiver 2 on his team, but I think that they might take the ball or the air out of the ball in New York even more than they will in Cleveland. But that is a good point. And that's why when we do that show that we do, again, this is the second time I've talked about it on this episode, but this big divisional preview episode that we do, or not even an episode, it's a full 8-part series that we do. Every episode is about an hour and a half long. We do dig really, really deep, and we look through the entire depth charts. We look through your projections, and that's where we're able to find these kind of hidden values. And we talked a little bit about Cedric Tillman on that show as well. So there's still time before the season kicks off. If you want to get into a real sicko series, you can find that on the Football Guys Dynasty Show podcast feed. Just look for the ones that are titled after different divisions around the NFL. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. This show would be nothing without you, the audience, taking the time to listen to us. Today we talked about breakout wide receivers, and we'll be back in just a couple days talking about some breakout running backs to target in your dynasty leagues. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you soon.